Meta and Yandex found ways to bypass Android's protections. More insight into the extent of Apple's push notification disclosures and the prevalence of session cookie hijacks. Signal might be rolling out subscriptions soon, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 228, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan from The New Oil, and Henry is away on adventures making the world a more private place and should be returning soon. This week's sponsor is Proton Pass. For those of you who don't know, Proton Pass is a password manager. It's built by the same team behind Proton Mail, Proton VPN, Proton Drive. One unique feature that sets them apart is their Hide My Email feature, which is powered by Simple Login. It basically integrates Simple Login for those of you who use it. I know that's really popular in the privacy community, and it generates random email addresses from right inside the password manager in a user-friendly way. And this is great for helping to dodge spam or leaks, or even for cybersecurity. If you give every account a different email address or a handful of different email addresses, that helps compartmentalize things. But they don't stop there. Your Proton account can monitor the dark web for any leaks of your information. Proton Pass has an integrated two-factor authenticator for TOTP. It securely syncs across all of your devices if you're the kind of person who values that in a password manager and wants it to synchronize. And of course, this is backed by Swiss privacy laws, which, as many of us know, are some of the best out there. Again, I want to be clear, we are well aware that laws are not perfect around here, but as Americans, we know that it certainly beats not having anything, and Switzerland has some pretty good privacy laws. Proton does not have any venture capital or startup investment, so that means that Proton is incentivized to answer to the users and to prioritize features that the community requests. It also means that they are incentivized not to inshitify just to pump out another dollar to get a better ROI for said investors that do not exist. So definitely a plus. Right now, Proton is offering an affiliate link with us, proton.me/surveillance report. And if you use that, you can get a discount for a limited time. The premium plan will be just $249 a month. If you are for some reason still not using a password manager, you must be new here. Thanks for watching. Or if you simply have not found the right password manager, definitely check out Proton Pass. We are big fans of Proton and appreciate all that they do for the privacy community and for sponsoring this video. So thank you to Proton. And again, go check out Proton Pass if you have not yet. This week's highlight story comes from Meta and Yandex, who are de-anonymizing Android users' web browsing identifiers. Meta, I think everyone here knows, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. Yandex, maybe some of you may not be familiar with. I call them like the Russian version of Google, because that's basically what they are. They offer a browser, a search engine, online food ordering, streaming media, online shopping, but they are Russian-based, as I just said. Quoting the article here, tracking code that Meta and Russia-based Yandex embed into millions of websites is de-anonymizing visitors by abusing legitimate internet protocols, causing Chrome and other browsers to surreptitiously send unique identifiers to native apps installed on a device. Google says it's investigating the abuse, which allows Meta and Yandex to convert ephemeral web identifiers into persistent mobile app user identities. The bypass, which Yandex began in 2017 and Meta started last September, allows the companies to bypass cookies or other identifiers from Firefox and Chromium-based browsers to native Android apps for Facebook, Instagram, and various Yandex apps. The companies can then tie that vast browsing history to the account holder logged into the app. This abuse has been observed only in Android, and evidence suggests that Meta Pixel and Yandex Metrica target only Android users. The researchers say that it may be technically feasible to target iOS because browsers on that platform allow developers to programmatically establish localhost connections that apps can monitor on local ports. In contrast to iOS, however, Android imposes fewer controls on localhost communications and background executions of mobile apps, while also implementing stricter controls in App Store vetting processes to limit such abuses. This overly permissive design allows Metapixel and Yandex Metrica to send web requests with web tracking identifiers to specific local ports that are continuously monitored by the Facebook, Instagram, and Yandex apps. These apps can then link pseudonymous web identities with actual user identities, even in private browsing modes, effectively de-anonymizing users' browsing habits on sites containing these trackers. So, if I understand this correctly, basically what they're saying is, so we've mentioned many times on this podcast, Google Analytics is very well known, but other companies have their own version. Metapixel is a very popular one. TikTok has a Pixel. I think there's a few others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And basically, when Metapixel and Yandex Metrica, which is their version, detect a user, so say you log into your email from the browser, and it says, click here to sign into this app or whatever. And you click it and it redirects you to the app. Apparently, the way that works is the app is allowed to pick an open port I don't understand how they do this securely, but basically that's what allows them to talk between each other, the web browser and the app, in a way that is a little bit more private and secure, that it's still sandboxed. It doesn't share tons of data by default, but that allows them to temporarily communicate to do that kind of transaction. Or, maybe a better example, you get an email that says, hey, there's a problem with your order, click here. And let's assume it's not phishing, because I know that's a really popular phishing one. It's just the first example that popped into my head. So you click it and it redirects, it opens the app and takes you to your order where it says, hey, the address is wrong or whatever. In that case, it uses an open port to do that. I'm assuming a non-traditional port like 443 or 80. Maybe it's something unique. I don't know if it's a specific port. Either way, they are abusing this same thing so that if you're in the browser and you're just browsing the web and the website you're on happens to have the metapixel, it will ping that port so that it is breaking out of the sandbox technically and reaching the app. And so therefore, even though in the browser, you may not be signed into Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and you may be doing something that has nothing to do with Meta whatsoever, but because the metapixel is there, it's pinging the Facebook app, which now knows that you are on that website, and therefore they're tracking you. Yeah, as it says, this is an actual function that serves a purpose, and they are abusing it to track you, which is probably not a surprise to veteran listeners. Getting back to the article, it says some browsers for Android have blocked the abusive JavaScript in trackers. DuckDuckGo, for instance, was already blocking domains and IP addresses associated with the trackers, preventing the browser from sending any identifiers to Meta. The browser also blocked most of the domains associated with the Yandex metrica. After the researchers notified DuckDuckGo of the incomplete blacklist, the developers added the missing addresses. The Brave browser, meanwhile, also blocked the sharing of identifiers due to its extensive block lists and existing mitigations to block requests to the local host without explicit user consent. Vivaldi forwards the identifiers to local Android ports when the default privacy setting is in place. Changing the setting to block trackers appears to thwart browsing history leakage, according to researchers. So far, Google has provided no indication that it plans to redesign the way Android handles local port access. For now, the most comprehensive protection against metapixel and Yandex metrica tracking is to refrain from installing Facebook, Instagram, or Yandex apps on Android devices. I didn't include it in the show notes here, but the article kind of goes on to talk about how block lists are really ineffective. This is something we don't talk about a lot. I think we probably mentioned it once or twice, and I definitely have some upcoming videos planned where I'm going to delve into this a little bit. But DNS-based blocking that a lot of VPNs do, the problem is that the defense is always on the defense. It's hard to get ahead of these things because we don't know what the next domain is going to be. We don't know what the next attack is going to be. So this is kind of a tricky thing to defend against. I do still strongly believe in taking advantage of these DNS blockers. They are very effective and very helpful, but I think it is important to realize that, again, they are playing defense. And this is basically almost similar to a 0-day. If we don't know that this thing is happening, it's hard to defend against it. So I think there are a lot of small ways that we can defend against it, reduce our risk, and maybe they'll add up. So like the article said, don't have the app on there. I've been a big fan of this for years, and I've been preaching this to a lot of people I know, pretty much everybody I know. If you're going to use Facebook, log in from the browser. Don't use the app. And especially if you're using a good browser like Brave or DuckDuckGo and you have those privacy protections enabled, that will automatically reduce the amount of tracking that goes on across the web. Again, if you're using a VPN on your phone, enabling those DNS blockers or using a custom DNS, NextDNS, or your own pie hole at home. Again, I know that's not perfect. It's playing defense, but the goal here is to stack up and add these things up. If you're using in the browser instead of the native app with Brave, or Firefox with uBlock Origin, with a VPN that has DNS blockers, or even your own DNS blocker. You don't need the VPN. You could use your own DNS app like NextDNS. Like if you're using all these things stacked on top of each other, it makes it a lot harder for these things to work, in my opinion. There's also something to be said for a lot of antivirus nowadays uses heuristics, which that also goes way above my head. I don't understand the technical details, but basically back in the day, antivirus ran on definitions, which were kind of like samples of the virus. Look for these bits of code. And it was the same issue, back and forth, offense and defense. These days, antivirus relies a lot more on heuristics, which is looking for certain behaviors. If it's pinging certain servers a lot more than it should, if it's asking for very elevated permissions, or again, I don't know everything that goes into it, but I know that's what these services do nowadays. So they're a little bit almost kind of like AI, but before AI was the big buzzword. It is pretty effective if it's done right. And again, it's not perfect. That's the thing. Nothing is ever perfect. Nothing is ever unhackable. I want to make sure I drive that home. But this story really highlights the need to, first of all, defense in depth. Don't just depend on one thing. I think I've ranted about this before. That's something I see a lot when people find out that I'm like a privacy expert is they ask me, it's always worded exactly like this. So what should I do for privacy? What do you do? It's always those two questions together. And it drives me crazy because what they're wanting me to say is like, oh, download NordVPN and now you're super invisible, hacker-proof, hacker man. And it's like, no, that's not how this stuff works. You know, the stuff I do is layered. I use voice over IP. I use block lists. I use, encrypted messaging, and I use two-factor and password managers. And like, I do all these different things that add up to give me a not perfect, but a very secure posture. And again, that's something that those people don't really understand when they're asking that question is maybe it's out of ignorance or maybe it's out of laziness, but they're looking for that one-click solution. Just download this app and you're good. And unfortunately, that's not how privacy works. And I've been seeing this comment lately. I hate that the defense is on the users. I hate that I have to tell people, don't download the app, try to use the browser. I hate that I have to say, change your DNS. Like, you have to do things. It is really unfortunate that this is where we are. But until Google implements better technical controls, until legislation catches up to give us actual privacy protections, unfortunately, this is where we are. It would be nice if we all lived in a world where we could leave our doors open when we leave the house and we could leave our cars unlocked. And maybe you live in one of those small towns where that's still pretty normal. But if you live in a city, that's just not how it works. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the way things are. I think that's kind of all I got on that one. It's an interesting story. It's pretty wild. Again, though, it should not come as a shock, especially for Meta. We all know that they're pretty garbage, and I don't really have a strong opinion on Yandex. I know I've seen them quite a bit in the privacy community. It's weird. I see a lot of people use them because they're like, well, they're outside the US, but they still hate your privacy just as much as Google. So personally, I wouldn't use them. I think there's other non-US services that care about your privacy more. All right, now we've got data breaches, and we've just got a handful this week. First up, a Vanta bug exposed customers' data to other customers. So Vanta helps corporate customers automate their security and compliance processes, and they said that they identified an issue on May 26th and that remediation will complete June 4th. They said that fewer than 4% of customers were affected and all have been notified. They have more than 10,000 customers, according to their website, suggesting the data exposure likely affects hundreds of customers. One customer told TechCrunch that Vanta's notice said this type of data, quote, generally includes information like employee names, roles, and information about configurations of some tools, such as the use of multi-factor authentication. When asked by TechCrunch, Vanta would not say what types of customer data were involved during the incident or comment on whether employee data was exposed. The North Face warns customers of April credential stuffing attack. So for those who don't know, the North Face is a major American outdoor apparel and equipment brand, which is owned by VF Corporation, which also controls Vans, Timberland, and Dickies. So this data includes full name, purchase history, shipping address, email address, date of birth, and phone number. The company noted that payment information was not exposed as an external provider handles payments on the site, and this occurred on April 23rd. Cartier, which is a luxury fashion brand, discloses a data breach amid fashion brand cyber attacks. So according to the company, the compromised information includes names, email addresses, and countries where the customer resides. They stressed that the breach did not include more sensitive data like passwords, credit card numbers, or banking details. Bleeping Computer contacted Cartier to learn more about the breach, such as when it occurred and how many people were impacted, but did not receive a reply at the time of publication. Tax resolution firm Optima Tax Relief was hit by ransomware and data leaked. So Optima Tax Relief is a well-known U.S. tax resolution and settlement firm that helps individuals and businesses in addressing and fixing federal and state tax issues. The company claims to be the nation's leading tax resolution firm, having resolved over $3 billion in tax liabilities for clients. The Chaos ransomware gang added Optima Tax Relief to its data leak site, claiming to have stolen 69 gigabytes of data. The data contains what appears to be corporate data and customer case files. Tax documents commonly contain sensitive personal information such as social security numbers, phone numbers, and home addresses. This next one I think might be an update, but I'm not sure because I saw that this organization had a cyber incident, but I don't think we knew it was like an actual breach at the time. Interlock Ransomware claims Kettering Health breach leaked stolen data. So Kettering Health employs over 15,000 people, including more than 1,800 physicians, and it manages 14 medical centers and over 120 outpatient facilities in Western Ohio. This occurred on May 20 and did result in service outages, like people were unable to get medical care. The ransomware group claims they stole 941 gigabytes of data, including over 20,000 folders containing 732,489 documents with sensitive information. This data allegedly includes bank reports, payroll information, patient data, pharmacy and blood bank documents, Kettering Health police personnel files, and scans of identity documents, including passports. And the last one is a quick update from February. Media giant Lee Enterprises says data breach affects 39,000 people. It was actually closer to 40,000. We knew they had a data breach, but they didn't really give us any details, and now we know how many people it affects. So that's kind of the update. With that out of the way, we will talk about companies, and we've only got one story this week that comes from Apple. It says Apple gave governments data on thousands of push notifications. This is also kind of an update to an ongoing story. I want to say a couple years ago, there was a big story about how push notifications are being abused by governments as a form of surveillance. Because of the way they work, they basically, every time you register, like, okay, you download an app, let's say WhatsApp, you download WhatsApp, and when it says, do you want to enable notifications? You say yes, and it generates a unique ID for your app on your phone. And then I believe basically stores that on the server. So basically every time you get a push notification, they can tie it directly to you. I do want to note real quick that not all services do that. Like, this depends on things that use Google and Apple for push notifications. There are lots of services like Tuda and I believe Signal that can operate without those services. And then last thing, for those who are just joining us, MicroG is still subject to this. Here's the actual story. Apple provided governments around the world with data related to thousands of push notifications sent to its devices, which can identify a target's specific device or in some cases include unencrypted content like the actual text displayed in the notification, according to data published by Apple. In one case that Apple ultimately did not provide data for, Israel demanded data related to nearly 700 push notifications as part of a single request. The practice first came to light in 2023 when Senator Ron Wyden sent a letter to U.S. Department of Justice revealing the practice, which also applied to Google. As the letter said, quote, the data these two companies receive includes metadata detailing which apps receive a notification and when, as well as the phone and associated Apple or Google account to which that notification was intended to be delivered. This report covers 6-month periods ranging from June of 2022 to June of 2024. So they said, for example, according to the data, the US made 99 requests for push token data related to 354 different push tokens and received data response to 65 of the requests between July and December 2023. I'm assuming all of that only applied to that half. The UK made 123 requests, about 128 tokens, and received data in response to 111. Germany was the only other country to receive data, which was in response to 5 of the country's requests. The Netherlands and France also requested data, but did not receive any. Israel made a single push notification data request in that time period, but it related to 694 tokens, according to the data. Representatives of the Israeli government did not respond to a request for comment, and neither did Apple. In another stretch of time, from January to June 2024, the UK received data in response to 127 requests, and the US got 36. Germany did successfully receive some data during that period. Singapore has also made requests but has not received any, according to the report. Now let's talk about research. Again, only one story this week. Billions of cookies up for grabs as experts warn over session security. So NordVPN says billions of stolen cookies currently on sale on either the dark web or Telegram-based marketplaces remain active and exploitable. More than 93.7 billion of them are currently available for criminals to buy online, and of those, between 7 and 9% are active on average. The majority of stolen cookies, which are about 90% of them, contain ID data used to uniquely identify users and deliver targeted ads. They can also contain data such as names, home and email addresses, locations, passwords, phone numbers, and genders, although these data points are only present in about 0.5% of all stolen cookies. The risk of ruinous personal data exposure as a result of cookie theft is therefore pretty slim. Other than ID cookies, the other statistically significant type of data that these can contain are details of user sessions. Over 1.2 billion of these are still up for grabs, roughly 6% of the total, and these are generally seen as more of a concern. Cybercriminals can feasibly take these session cookies and pose as others on web pages, authenticate into services without the need for credentials, and in many cases, this can also bypass MFA. The most common way crooks get a hold of these cookies is through infostealer malware, with Redline being prevalent. It was linked to about 44% of the total cookies researchers found. The Vidar, Luma C2, and Meta infostealers took second, third, and fourth spots on the list, although the later two, as well as Redline, have been the subject of successful law enforcement disruption operations. Now let's move into the politics section. We've got quite a few from around the world. So first one comes from a Canadian listener. Thank you very much for sending this to us. The headline says, Liberal government tables border security bill with sweeping reforms and asylum claim clampdown. So the government has tabled a significant border security bill on Tuesday that includes sweeping new powers to intercept or search communications, including mail, a tightening of the asylum claim process, and increased intelligence collection and sharing across the federal government. The 139-page Bill C2 proposes vast changes to Canadian border security, data collection and sharing by federal authorities, anti-money laundering rules, the asylum claim system, and the Canadian Coast Guard. Throughout all those themes are improved powers for law enforcement and intelligence services like CSIS to access information, including some without a warrant approved by a court or even search Canadians' mail as part of a criminal investigation. During a technical briefing for reporters, a senior government official said that the changes were meant to improve police and intelligence agencies' ability to apply for warrants to collect digital evidence following a series of court rulings that significantly hampered it. It would also increase the Canada Border Services Agency's, or CBSA's, ability to search containers exiting the country by obligating transporters and warehouse operators to provide site access to border agents for export inspections. The public safety minister told reporters on Tuesday that the new data collection and sharing powers in the bill also come with necessary safeguards. The Liberals are also proposing to increase civil and criminal penalties for failing to comply with Canadian anti-money laundering and terrorism funding laws while boosting compliance and surveillance obligations. The bill would also implement a new act forcing almost any organization that offers nearly any form of, quote, electronic services to organize users' data to ensure that it can be requested and accessed by law enforcement or intelligence agencies if necessary and approved. In a world first, Brazilians will soon be able to sell their digital data. Last month, Brazil announced it is rolling out a data ownership pilot that will allow its citizens to manage, own, and profit from their digital footprint, the first such nationwide initiative in the world. The project is administered by DataPrev, a state-owned company that provides technological solutions for the government's social programs. DataPrev is partnering with Drumwave, a California-based data valuation and monetization firm. If implemented, it will be the first public-private partnership that allows citizens rather than companies to get a share of the global data market, currently valued at $4 billion and expected to grow to over $40 billion by 2034. The pilot involves a small group of Brazilians who will use data wallets for payroll loans. When the users apply for a new loan, the data in the contract will be collected in the data wallets, which companies will be able to bid on. Users will have the option to opt out. It works much like third-party cookies, but instead of simply accepting or declining, people can choose to make money. The D-Wallet allows users to deposit the data generated by their daily activities into a data savings account. After a user accepts a company's offer on their data, payment is cashed in the data wallet and can be immediately moved to a bank account. In 2023, Brazil's Congress drafted a bill that classifies data as personal property. The country's current data protection law classifies data as a personal, inalienable right. Australian ransomware victims must now tell the government if they pay up. The law, initially proposed last year, only applies to organizations with an annual turnover greater than 3 million Australian dollars, which is 1.93 million US dollars, alongside a smaller group of specific entities working within critical infrastructure sectors. The turnover threshold is expected to capture just the top 6.5% of all registered businesses in Australia, comprising roughly half of the country's economy. Reports will be made to Australia's Signals Directorate within 72 hours. Companies that fail to make a report could receive 60 penalty units within the Australian civil penalty system, and the mandatory reporting requirement is intended to provide the ASD and the country's other authorities with better visibility over the nature of the ransomware threat. Russia is going to roll out the digital ruble in 2026, enabling full control over citizens' spending. So Russia's central bank plans to introduce a digital ruble and begin paying all state employees in its virtual currency as of January 1st, 2026, according to the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Under draft legislation that the State Duma approved at first reading on May 22nd, a bill will require banks and merchants to facilitate digital ruble transactions and a universal QR payment code for purchases. Beginning October 1st, the digital ruble will be used for a limited range of federal budget expenditures, transitioning on January 1st to full unrestricted use for all federal outlays. HUR warns that Kremlin financiers will track every digital ruble transaction in real time, granting authorities the power to block citizens' accounts without a court order and automatically deduct taxes, fines, and other charges. Social benefits payable in digital rubles will be usable only for government-approved categories of goods and services, and spending may be restricted based on a citizen's place of residence or product type. Critics, from human rights groups to economic analysts, argue that the digital ruble will entrench state surveillance. According to The Cryptonomist, Russia's CBDC may replicate China's model of monitoring every transaction, but with even tighter Kremlin oversight. Ukrainian intelligence observers highlight the risks of behavioral loyalty systems where digital currency access depends on citizens' political and social reliability. Germany fines Vodafone $51 million for privacy and security breaches. Vodafone, for those who don't know, offers mobile and fixed services to over 330 million customers in 15 countries across Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. Its financial technology businesses also serve nearly 83 million customers in 7 African countries. The British multinational telecommunications company was hit with a second €30 million fine for authentication vulnerabilities of its Mine Vodafone, or My Vodafone, and the company's hotline, which allowed attackers to access customer eSIM profiles. Vodafone has updated its processes and systems, replacing some of them to mitigate future risks. The company has also updated procedures for selecting and auditing partner agencies, and it has severed ties with partners linked to fraudulent activities. The telecom giant has already paid the fines and donated several million euros to organizations that promote data protection, media literacy, and combating cyberbullying. Chinese hacked US telecom a year before known wireless breach. This is not about Salt Typhoon. This is a separate hack, apparently. Investigators working for telecommunications firm discovered last year that malware used by Chinese state-backed hacking groups was on the company's systems for 7 months starting in the summer of 2023. An unclassified report sent to Western intelligence agencies doesn't name the company where the malware was found, and the people familiar with the matter declined to identify it. The 2023 intrusion at an American telecoms company, which hasn't been previously reported, came about a year before US government officials and cybersecurity companies said they began spotting clues that Chinese hackers had penetrated many of the country's largest phone and wireless firms. The US government has blamed the later breaches on a Chinese state-backed hacking group dubbed Salt Typhoon. And last but not least, OpenAI is retaining all ChatGPT logs indefinitely. Here's who's affected. So OpenAI confronted user panic over a sweeping court order requiring widespread chat log retention, including users' deleted chats, after moving to appeal the order that allegedly impacts the privacy of hundreds of millions of ChatGPT users globally. In a statement, OpenAI explained that the court order came in a lawsuit with the New York Times and other news organizations, which alleged that deleted chats may contain evidence of users prompting ChatGPT to generate copyrighted news articles. To comply with the order, OpenAI must retain all user content indefinitely going forward based on speculation that the news plaintiffs might find something that supports their case. So the order impacts all users of ChatGPT Free, Plus, and Pro, as well as of OpenAI's API, but this does not impact ChatGPT Enterprise or EDU customers. It also doesn't impact any user with a zero data retention agreement. All right, and we didn't have any misfits this week, so our FOSS section is going to be our last section, and we just have two very short stories. So the first one says, recent commits suggest Signal is preparing a paid subscription for backups. It's really straightforward. I do not know how to read code, but even I can read in the code. It says, and I'm going off memory here, I know if I put it up, you can see it, but from memory, it says something like, in the code, you can very clearly see, it says, your premium subscription for chat backups has expired. Would you like to renew? It's something like that, where it's like very obvious. You look at it and it's like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Now, I don't know if this is like something they're testing, something they're thinking about. I don't know. I don't really know what the development process is for Signal. And then our last story of the week, new F-Droid languages, Basque and Catalan. If you speak either of those languages, F-Droid is now in your language. All right, like I said, there were no misfits this week, so that's all our news. Meta and Yandex have found ways to bypass Android's protections, and it's feasible. If they did, so did other people. So remember to try to protect yourself, layer your protection, try not to use the app if you can avoid it. We now have more insight into the extent of Apple's push notification disclosures and the prevalence of session cookie hijacks. So again, just knowing these things helps us accurately gauge where our threat model should be, how concerned we should be, and what actions we want to take about it. And Signal might be rolling out subscriptions soon. Man, I just realized I really horribly worded that in the opening, but I'll keep it. Which might be a really good way of sustaining their business, which I think we can all agree, goodwill donations only get us so far. So good job for Signal. As long as they don't paywall anything super important, I'm totally cool with that personally. Yeah, a reminder that our sponsor is Proton Pass. If you haven't checked them out, you totally should, and support them and support us at the same time. This is a password manager built by the same team behind Proton Mail and Proton VPN. They specifically want to call attention to the Hide My Email feature, which is powered by Simple Login. It's a way to integrate Simple Login directly into the password manager in a very user-friendly way so that when you're creating an account, you can very easily generate an alias email address on the spot. And again, it's super user-friendly. This is a great way to compartmentalize your life, to manage spam, to protect against data breaches, all kinds of stuff. Other highlights of the service include dark web monitoring for any leaks of your information, an integrated authenticator for two-factor, TOTP specifically, secure sync across all your devices if that is something that you want from a password manager, And of course, Proton is backed by Swiss privacy laws, which are notoriously pretty strong. There's no venture capital, so they are not incentivized to pump in ads and, all these different kinds of things. They are incentivized to answer to you, the users, and the features you want to see, and make sure that you have a good experience so that you keep paying. And for a limited time, you can test out the premium plan at just $249 a month using our link, proton.me/surveillance report. So again, thank you to Proton for sponsoring us and helping everyone stay a little bit more private and safe online. They also do some pretty good activist work in the political sphere. Again, $249. I think that's worth checking out if you have never checked that out before and you're interested. So thank you guys for listening to Surveillance Report. Links to all the stories will be found in the show notes. And if you have a story that you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing, please share the podcast around. Make sure you are subscribed. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and you can help us do that. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.